Hillsdale College is offering more than 40, holy mackerel, 40 free online courses. Personally, I'm enjoying Constitution 101, where we explore the Constitution, the challenges it faced during the Civil War, and how it's been undermined for more than a century by progressivism and liberalism. Start your free Constitution 101 course with Hillsdale College. Go right now to levinforhillsdale.com to enroll. That's Levin for Hillsdale.com to enroll. There's no cost. It's easy to get started. That's levinforhillsdale.com. Register for free, folks. Levin, levinforhillsdale.com.
You're invited to take a deep dive into the founding principles of the United States. Join Mark Levin and Larry Arnn, the president of Hillsdale College, as they present Liberty and Learning.
Hello, America. This is Mark Levin, and we are here with Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, in our partnership here, our podcast, Liberty and Learning. And this is our inaugural show for 2025. We're very excited about doing this entire series of programs for you, and it's going to be a special episode. Dr. Arnn and I have been around a little while. We've observed politics. We've observed government. We've written. We've talked about a lot of this, but I can say, at least for me, the early days of President Trump's administration, and I served 8 years in the Reagan administration, I have honestly never seen anything like this in terms of reversing what had been the horrendous trajectory of the country. Dr. Arnn, what do you think?
Well, it's I actually think that if all this matures and gets to where it may go, it's an achievement like winning the Civil War. I think it's a regime change, as we say in the study of politics. This disasters that you're talking about, they started unfolding actively in America in 1932, and they have grown so that the government is no longer 12% of the gross domestic product. Now it's 51%. And they've grown so that not only state and local government is not most of government, actually local government, cities and counties and towns, was over 60% of the government in 1930. Now it's 18%. The federal government in 1930 was 23%. Now it's 63%. So we've moved the money and the resources of America into a treasury far, far away from the people. And it regulates everything. It's a comprehensive new kind of regime. And it's getting control of elections and of conversation. It's controlling speech. Civil rights are in question now. And that just means it's a different country, or as Lincoln put it, a house divided, because the old country persists, and it has just won a victory, and it is counterattacking in the most resolute way I've ever seen.
It is absolutely shocking in a wonderful way. I mean, let's take this a little bit piece by piece, Dr. Arnn. This massive bureaucracy. He walks in the office, he's changing the nature of it immediately. He gets rid of all the DEI types. He's replacing all the inspectors general. Many of them are left-wing holdovers for like two presidencies. And he is also going to adjust this civil service system, because people may not know there's 2.5 million bureaucrats and there's about 3,200 political appointees at all levels. And he's saying, we can't get the government, the bureaucracy, to do what we want if there's not more non-government people in there. That's a good thing right now, right? It's rebalancing the federal bureaucracy.
Yeah, you have to have a civil servant. And to paraphrase Winston Churchill, they need to be both civil and servants. And what have they become? They're one of the biggest political forces in the land. And, the direct employees of the federal government are close to 3 million. But then the contractors who work indirectly for the federal government their whole careers, that's some unknown number more. And they make laws in these regulatory agencies, the number of which is even controversial, but it's about 150, maybe more. And they make the laws, and then inside each agency, they enforce the laws, and they have judges who hear disputes under the law. And you can't go to the real independent courts until you've exhausted that whole process. And so it's a new kind of government. That's the thing to understand. The choice is in front of the American people. shall they have constitutional government or shall they have bureaucratic administrative government? And that is the choice that's being played out right now with fierce intensity and speed.
I mean, even the idea that you had, I think it was 95% of the bureaucrats working from home most of the week, refusing to come to work. And you had all these empty federal buildings. It was, it looked like 1930s Europe there for a while, 1920s. Even that, he said, you either show up for work or we're firing you. What do you make of that?
I think there's going to be lawsuits about every step of this course, but I read that Biden negotiated some agreement with the federal employees, some of the unions, that they didn't have to go back to work. And they don't, there are some agencies that the rule is you have to be in the office once a month. And then, does anybody believe that the systems for monitoring whether they're actually working or not are any good?
Nah.
And of course, there's a question whether it's even a good thing that they're not working or not. Because what do they contribute if everything? I listened to a inspiring podcast by a guy named Chemath. I must say his last name, but he's a friend of Elon Musk and one of these tech gazillionaires who's come around. And his frustration, he's a very interesting man. His frustration is, I have built in my life great things, and I'm not allowed to do it anymore. And China is they are right now cleaning our clocks. They are more productive than we are in a communist system. And so part of the issue before the world today is that a better system? Does it work better? Is it productive more than a free system? Well, we haven't had a good test of that because we have only a somewhat free system. So if we free it up, then America can fulfill its role of being the last best hope of mankind on earth. And that's what Trump is aiming for. And it is marvelous to me how absolutely clear he is about all that. He went out to California, and common sense is a great theme of his. And, that's Winston Churchill, when he was 27 years old, wrote a letter to H.G. Wells. And he says, you can't rule by experts, because expert knowledge is narrow knowledge, and every practical decision requires a whole range of factors to be considered. He says, the ignorance of the plain man who only knows what hurts is a better guide. And so, Trump lands in L.A., and at one point he says, we've discovered that water is very effective for fighting fires. And he says, and there's a thing called a faucet, and you turn it on and water comes out. Common sense. It's delicious. It's interesting too. It's like, Trump, they say, is like Andy Jackson, and he likes Andy Jackson. He's got a picture of Andy Jackson in the Oval Office. And Andy Jackson was a rough customer, a soldier, a very blunt man. And I went and read his 2 inaugural addresses in preparation for this. And both of them are interesting because both of them, first of all, they're subservient. He gets his authority from the people. States have more authority than the federal government. The federal government has supreme authority over some subjects. And of course, the crisis of his time was nullification. The Congress passed a tariff. The state of South Carolina nullified the law, but it's explicit in the Constitution. The federal government has the power to pass. It's named. They have the power to pass tariffs. And so he gets very tough, and he gets a law passed that he can go down there and suppress the state if he needs to. And then Henry Clay, the great compromiser, works it out so that the tariff is gradually reduced over several years. It doesn't go away. And that's how that passed. Now, in the context of that, he's doing 2 things always in both inaugural addresses. He argues that state authority is most authority. And a simple reading of the Constitution says that. Mm-hmm. But that the federal government, where it's writ properly runs, is supreme. And you can't have, he echoes George Washington, Abraham Lincoln would talk like this, you can't have freedom without both. And both have to have their authorities. And of course, most authority in America is reserved to the people. Trump released something this morning. It's kind of a summary of what he's been up to. And it's 3 pages long. And one of them is, now Americans can choose to buy any toilet or dishwasher or stove or car that they want to. And that's where in the Constitution does it say the federal government should decide those things, And so it's just amazing to me. And one of the things that I've been saying lately is, I imagine, I've never been, but if you go on safari, they might tell you, if you shoot an elephant, you should probably kill it. And what they've done is they wounded Donald Trump, and now he's back, and he's angry. and he's, they arrived with a plan. I happen to know that there's been 150 people working on the next administration for 2 years and not publishing anything, just people, private people, working for a think tank, just working away, making plans, under Trump's ultimate direction. But he wasn't running it. He wasn't there very much. I don't really know that much about it, but I thought, wow. And, the transition team has been very purposeful, and they're getting a lot of appointments in. I heard a story. There's a guy named, Bob McNair, and he was a congressman from Ohio, good guy. And he told me, for some reason, Wally Hickel, who was a great Alaska politician, senator,
I remember
governor.
him. He was a governor.
Yeah, and when Nixon won his first election, they confirmed all his appointments on the day of the inauguration. But a bunch of senators were mad at Wally Hickel about something, and so they protested. They confirmed him on the second day, and that was a protest. Because the Congress thought, the president's been elected, he should have his people. And that was the practice now. And Trump seems to be getting his through. Hegseth, J.D. Vance had to break the tie, and Hegseth has been confirmed. Well, the people elected Trump, and he has authority over the executive branch, and he does have to go to the Congress, and he does. Like Andy Jackson is wonderfully explicit about this.
All right, we've got a lot more to go here. It's so fascinating. And one of my questions for Dr. Arnn in the next segment's going to be, they woke up a sleeping bear, but the question is this. They could have awakened a sleeping bear, and he could have done the wrong thing, policy-wise. Where do we think Donald Trump gets these ideas from? I understand this think tank, but he must agree with them. I mean, he wasn't always of this viewpoint. He'd been a Democrat, he'd been a liberal, he'd been a Reform Party member, and so forth, but I would contend right now, and as I did on my Fox show on Sunday, Donald Trump is among the top 3 conservatives in the last century, Coolidge, Reagan, and Trump, and may possibly, by the time his term is up, be the most conservative president, period. We'll be right back. Time is our most precious commodity, and so many of my listeners have asked for my advice about how they can spend it wisely to improve themselves and the people around them. Well, Hillsdale College is offering more than 40 free online courses. Learn about the works of C.S. Lewis, the stories in the book of Genesis, the meaning of our Constitution, the rise and fall of the Roman Republic, or the history of the ancient Christian church with Hillsdale College's free online courses. Personally, I'm enjoying Constitution 101, and in this course, you'll explore the design and purpose of the Constitution, the challenges it faced during the Civil War, and how it's been undermined for more than a century by progressivism and liberalism. This 12-lecture course is self-paced, so start whenever and wherever you want. Start your free Constitution 101 course with Hillsdale College. It's free. Go right now to levinforhillsdale.com to enroll. There's no cost. It's easy to get started. That's Levin for Hillsdale.com. Register for free. levinforhillsdale.com. Welcome back, America. Here I am with my dear friend, by the way, Dr. Larry Arnn, the president, the head muckety-muck at Hillsdale College. Really, I call it the shining college on the hill, which is sort of a takeoff on Reagan, of course. This is episode 5. We have our wonderful partnership with Westwood One and Hillsdale College, our podcast network here. And our program's called Liberty and Learning. As you can tell, whenever you're with Larry Arnn, that's the truth. You're going to learn a lot about liberty. Now, Larry, you were talking about Andrew Jackson as I had to go to break. Did you want to finish your thought?
Well, Trump likes Andrew Jackson, president, and Andrew Jackson was a very aggressive man, as Trump was. He actually was a killer, general and a warrior on a battlefield. But his inaugural addresses both go on about the rule of law, that the executive branch starts with the law. The great test for Donald Trump and every president will be, is it lawful what he is doing? I think so. But of course, that has to be watched. And we don't place our faith in anybody, but in the Constitution and in the ultimate judgment of the people. Trump likes to talk about that. And I think Bill Barr, who fell out with Trump later over January 6th, he published an article in the Wall Street Journal not long before that, and he said, the question is, are the actions of Donald Trump in his first administration lawful? And he said they are. He is careful about that. He's doing a lot of tariff stuff that is legislatively allowed. It is empowered by laws that were passed, that the Congress passed and the president signed. Same thing about this tariff stuff, right? And so he's using the powers that he has. And if the people don't like it, they can, he's term limited now, but they can elect somebody hostile to him next time if they don't like what he does. And that means he's on a clock and he knows it and he's working fast and he thinks it'll work. And I pray that it does. And I do support it because Andrew Jackson, in his first inaugural, Trump begins by saying, this is different. This is not just a change in parties. This is a return of power to the people. And that is the fight that Donald Trump has thought he was in when he entered politics in 2015. And I think that's the right fight. I think that we have to have a government that is accountable to us. And so much power in people who are tenured and have guaranteed salaries and are hard to fire and make and enforce and adjudicate the laws within each agency, I think that's dangerous. And I think we need to return accountability to the people who are responsible to the people.
And those of us who've wanted to get this under control, what did we expect would happen? You're going to need somebody with a strong personality, who's charismatic, who can articulate his views, who's going to go in there and stir things up. I mean, you can't wrestle the bureaucracy to the ground unless you wrestle the bureaucracy to the ground. You can't do the things that he said he wanted to do unless you go against the trajectory of Washington, D.C. But here's my question to you. Where do you think this comes from? I mean, even if he was, he was brutalized legally and otherwise, and he comes back and he's ready to go, and he knows, as you point out, I got 4 years to get this done. Maybe I have 100 days, maybe I have 2 years, but I'm hitting the ground running. We've never seen anything like this before. Why is he so committed to these principles? Because what underlays what he's doing, even though it may not be a coherent philosophy, there's certain principles that he obviously believes in.
Yeah. Well, I went through a revelation myself about that. I met Donald Trump in 2015. Like everybody else in America, I knew who he was. I did not have a good impression of him. I thought he was a glitzy businessman show pony. And, you know, but everybody knew who he was. To this day, I've never watched The Apprentice. But he upstaged me at an event, as he does everybody. I was the keynote speaker at the Oakland County Lincoln Day, 1,800 people. And they told me a few days before that Donald Trump was going to come. He would speak before me, and he wouldn't have as much time as me. And I say, great. And so he starts talking, and it gets to be 55 minutes, and he's still talking. And my wife leaned over to me and said, Larry, this is outrageous. And I said, yeah, look around. It's pretty good. And I thought, we need to take this man seriously. So I looked him up, and I found out that since at least 1990, he's been talking about these themes. And they seem to grow out of, and there's a lot about it. He goes on Oprah, he only goes in the most prominent places. And he seems to figure out that I have some idea how to run a railroad. And, he's a big businessman. He likes the people who works for him. He likes the workers. He finds out how the business is doing from them. Those are themes of his. And he sees that we're building this top-down thing and that it's not accountable. And he starts defining for himself what we came to call the swamp. And I thought, wow, these are strong themes in him. He didn't just make them up today. So I think that he is just he's like Elon Musk and these guys, these gazillionaires who've joined his side now. They're really good at figuring things out. And he figured a lot of stuff out. And he's also, really good. He's a brilliant communicator. He's funny. I know him a little bit. I've always found him likable when I talk to him. He's a force, when you talk to him, you better be on your game because he's quick and he questions and he's
really smart.
Oh yeah, it's super smart. And these are, look, if I didn't have this belief that I developed with you over the last 45 years, friends of ours and we helped to figure this stuff out. The insight that this is a regime question, a different kind of government that has been introduced with different purposes, responding to different accountabilities. The man named John Marini is very important. A student of mine, later employee of Clarence Thomas at the Equal Opportunity Commission, still around, still wise. He started working on this in the 70s and wrote his doctoral thesis about it. We thought it was weird that somebody would even be working on this back then. But Lord, did he not prove his point over the years, and a lot of us helped. And Trump, on a, entirely independent ground, using common sense and, his understanding what it takes to make a business work. And of course, he's got a lot of experience with government because he worked in building stuff and real estate, and that requires permission. And that, in America, like the property rights revolution that was made in America first. That is to say, you can do what you want with your own property. And if you constitute a nuisance with what you do to the public or to the neighbors, the burden of proof is on them. And that means that powers at the center are not disposing of all the property. They can stop you, but they've got to prove it. And what we've done in America, in all development, in all environmental regulation, is now you want to build something. Here is the string of hoops that you have to go through. And they will take years, and they will multiply the cost of everything you do. But that's true in manufacturing. That's true all over the place. We have become from a society of few rules governed by goals and by personal responsibility. We've become a top-down, rules-heavy, technical society. And we're not very productive. We're still more productive than anybody because of our nature and because we're freer than most countries. But we're not very productive. And, and see, the competing systems in the world that are successful are the United States and China. Europe is collapsing. And so what's the Chinese model? It's everything regulated at the center, but the bias And the farther you get from the centers of power, the more latitude to act you have there. And everything is encouraging more production all the time, right? And maybe that system where ultimately they can control everything you say if they want to, but they're in favor of production, maybe that will be more powerful than our way. But if that case, freedom has lost its chance, So we have to let people go. And they have to bear the cost of their own actions, too. And that's the American system. And Trump is a very caring man, by the way. I think he said a great thing. If you read Mark Andreessen, who's, rich as Croesus, he comments the other day that we are accumulating debt at the rate of $1 trillion every 100 days. And it's speeding up, right? And our debt is now significantly higher than the gross domestic product for a year. That's dangerous, right? So Trump addresses that the other day. And he says, just remember, we've got great assets too. The value of the assets in America is probably $300 trillion. He says, we got that. And we've got liquid gold, he says, underneath us. Mm-hmm. And he says, and we do have way too much debt. And then he says, and we're going to knock that right down. Well, God bless him. We need to do that. And, Trump is good at managing debt. I mean, he's been at the edge of bankruptcy more than once in his life, and he worked his way out of it. And so we need to do that. And in the end, the key to that is to be more productive. And that means letting people work and profit.
And when you look across the board, whether it's energy or tax and regulatory policies, or we talked about the bureaucracy at some length here, securing the border, and American sovereignty, and we mentioned tariffs at the top of the hour. I went back and I looked. I read some of the founders. Of course, they funded the government mostly through tariffs early on. Mm-hmm. Hamilton was a big tariff advocate. Jefferson was too. Look, I'm still not, but I get it. And but I get the point, especially when it comes to enemy countries. That said, really, tariffs were part of the Republican Party right up through World War II until after World War II. And then when you look at Reagan's record, which I hadn't really done, even though I served in the Reagan administration, he used more quotas than tariffs, but he put quotas and tariffs on Japan, on electronics, particularly televisions and computer boards, and he put it on them on steel. I was amazed. And Lighthouser, who was a deputy trade representative to Reagan, is the trade representative to Trump. So when you look at those two records, Reagan spoke of free markets and then did that also. Trump speaks of free markets, but he mostly talks about tariffs. But when you look at them, honestly, Larry, they're not that far apart when you look at their records.
No.
All right, we're going to take a break. We're going to pick it up on this issue of tariffs and quotas that Reagan used and Trump really wants to use big time and is. And are they all that far apart? I know, as a conservative, you go, wait a minute, what's going on here? It doesn't mean you have to agree with them. I just want to make the point that Trump's not out there hanging by himself. A lot of Republicans and even conservative Coolidge used tariffs a lot as an example. So we'll pursue this with Dr. Arnn when we return. This is Liberty and Learning, our podcast partnership, Westwood One and Hillsdale College. He's Larry Arnn. I'm Mark Levin, episode 5. We'll be right back. Time is our most precious commodity, and so many of my listeners have asked for my advice about how they can spend it wisely to improve themselves and the people around them. Well, Hillsdale College is offering more than 40 free online courses. Learn about the works of C.S. Lewis, the stories in the book of Genesis, the meaning of our Constitution, the rise and fall of the Roman Republic, or the history of the ancient Christian church with Hillsdale College's free online courses. Personally, I'm enjoying Constitution 101, and in this course, you'll explore the design and purpose of the Constitution, the challenges it faced during the Civil War, and how it's been undermined for more than a century by progressivism and liberalism. This 12-lecture course is self-paced, so start whenever and wherever you want. Start your free Constitution 101 course with Hillsdale College. It's free. Go right now to levinforhillsdale.com to enroll. There's no cost. It's easy to get started. That's Levin for Hillsdale.com. Register for free. Levinforhillsdale.com. Welcome back, America. This is Westwood One, Hillsdale College, podcast partnership, Liberty and Learning. I'm with our friend Dr. Larry Arnn, the president of Hillsdale. I'm Mark Levin. So, Larry, tariffs. Reagan and Trump were really not that far apart on this issue.
No, they're not. I've said for years, Winston Churchill was a free trader, and that works a certain way in British politics, by the way. And Abraham Lincoln and James Madison and Thomas Jefferson and all of them were protectionists. The natural law does not speak to me on this issue. It looks to me like a prudential question. And that means that China has been running a mercantilist policy. That is to say, they're gathering the vital means of production unto themselves and raw materials whenever they can. And we shouldn't let them do that. And that's just, in other words, free trade should be the rule. But as you pointed out earlier, most of our revenue for the federal government for most of American history came from tariffs. And that's an interesting problem because the American Revolution started over a question of tariffs. And here's the way that worked. They agreed that the British government could impose high tariffs for the purpose of regulating trade, but and that's one part of what Trump is proposing, but they couldn't impose low tariffs for the purpose of getting money, revenue. They can't tax us, see? And the reason revenue tariffs tend to be low is because you want the goods to come in so you can collect the money. And that's how America worked for a long time. And we always had some high tariffs, too, because Lincoln was a big proponent of, and Coolidge, as you point out, and Washington, all of them, were big proponents of encouraging manufacturing, because they could just see that that's crucial to national power. And if you don't have that, you can't defend yourself. You can say the same thing about technology today. Like the weekend news is China's got very far with artificial intelligence. And we've been boycotting chips to them of the kind best for doing that. Very, very fast chips made mostly by NVIDIA. And it turns out they don't need them, right? Well, if China is better at that than we are, then that's a problem, because they're going to use it to get power. And they're going to use that power at our expense. And so a lot of what Trump is saying has direct national security implications. Isn't it interesting to you? Trump is he's talking about the Monroe Doctrine, right? That Panama, the Gulf of America, Greenland on the way to Europe, there's a choke point there between Greenland and Iceland and the United Kingdom. And when we have to get a lot of heavy stuff like in world wars to Europe, those are places where somebody can obstruct us getting there, and or else make the trip a lot longer, right? And so he's starting out to revivify and defend the country, and the reason I like that is because it is tied to a drive to make the government more accountable to the people, and to leave. And if America is to compete in the world, if it's to fulfill its function as the last best hope of mankind on earth, it will do that through freedom and the initiative of individual people. And, I'm in the college business. And what do you learn in the college business? You never commit an act of learning for a student. You can help them, but they have to be working hard every second. And if they're not, they don't learn. And so the key to recruiting in a college is to get people who really want to do it. And then, wow, watch it go, right? It's America in microcosm. And you see it every time you teach a class. Your listeners, Mark, are very motivated, right? They want to. And if they didn't, maybe you could make them listen. You could have a law that only you get to talk. But then people wouldn't learn anything. See? They wouldn't benefit from the experience. It's in them. Lincoln said about slavery once, God made every man with one head and two hands and one mouth. The plain implication being that the head should guide the hands in the feeding of the mouth. And this idea that experts at the center should make endless rules to shape the society, to tell us what kind of washing machines and stoves we should buy. That's China, right? And I think they're better at that kind of thing than we are. We suffer from it. Maybe they can make it work, but it won't be good ultimately. Like, I saw a thing this morning. They've been asking questions of this new DeepSeek Chinese AI that's supposed to be hot stuff. And they ask it about Taiwan. What is the status of Taiwan? And you can ask it from now till Sunday, and you'll never get it to say that there's any independence in Taiwan, right? And and in a good web search, you'd find out an argument about that, right? Because there is an argument about that, and there's a history there, and you would put into that history the deep truth. It's in the Declaration of Independence, or Lincoln. Put Lincoln's words: any people anywhere having the inclination have the right to throw off a government and establish one better to their liking, right? You'll never read that in the Chinese DeepSeek, product of the Chinese deep state. Mm-hmm. Well, you need to, people have a right to hear things like that and think about them. They are human beings. And the Chinese are human just like we are. Well, they don't have that right. And if they become more powerful and use that power to suppress that right in their own people and around the world, which they do, then it'll be a worse world, and civilization itself will disappear.
Fantastic. This is what you get, by the way, if you go to Hillsdale College. Absolute genius. The faculty's brilliant. The students are great. One of these days, I'll make my way back there, Larry Arnn. I mean, I got to think about
that. Yeah?
Yeah, it really is. But we appreciate you out there. Look, my audience appreciates you because they know to go to your site. They know about your 40 free courses. They know. They love Hillsdale College and the Mark Levin Show, and we all do. And this was episode 5. We're going to do many more of Liberty and Learning with Dr. Larry. And you know what? This podcast, and by the way, Hillsdale website and the faculty and the information that's presented, if you're a homeschooler, I mean, this is like a treasure chest, I think, of the kind of information available and the information sources that are alluded to where you can look it up yourself. And if you're not, that's great too, because you're going to learn a lot of information right here on our podcast. And again, through Hillsdale College's outreach to the American people. No other college does anything even close to this, which is why it's so fantastic. So I want to thank you, Larry Arnn. We've got a brand new year, a brand new president. I can tell you're excited. I'm excited. This is Liberty and Learning, our fantastic podcast partnership with Westwood One and Hillsdale College. We have a wonderful podcast network. I hope you'll check it out. If you want to learn more about Hillsdale, you go to hillsdale.edu, hillsdale.edu. That's about it. Doctor, any final words?
No, you're great, Mark. This is fun to do. Glad we're doing this.
This is fun to do. And you're great is a great way to end. Calling me great is okay. See you next time, America. Take care of yourself. Be well. Time is our most precious commodity, and so many of my listeners have asked for my advice about how they can spend it wisely to improve themselves and the people around them. Well, Hillsdale College is offering more than 40 free online courses. Learn about the works of C.S. Lewis, the stories in the book of Genesis, the meaning of our Constitution, the rise and fall of the Roman Republic, or the history of the ancient Christian church with Hillsdale College's free online courses. Personally, I'm enjoying Constitution 101, and in this course, you'll explore the design and purpose of the Constitution, the challenges it faced during the Civil War, and how it's been undermined for more than a century by progressivism and liberalism. This 12-lecture course is self-paced, so start whenever and wherever you want. Start your free Constitution 101 course with Hillsdale College. It's free. Go right now to levinforhillsdale.com to enroll. There's no cost. It's easy to get started. That's Levin for Hillsdale.com. Register for free. levinforhillsdale.com.